we here for? What's going on here? It's just like there's something going on and it all makes sense, but who knows? So finding out why I'm here, what am I supposed to do is my biggest challenge. Here we go. There's an old saying in one of the mantras about different things that are unattainable. It goes through a whole listing of them, and the final answers is such and such is unattainable, and I shall attain it. I've always liked those mantras. I've always been up against these things that I can't attain it, but I will. So, come on, go, guy. There we go. I never wanted to marry. I never wanted to have children. I just grew up thinking I don't want to have children. And I had opportunity because I dated a girl for a number of years. We planned on marriage and all that. And she wanted 6 children. And I said, oh God. But we really liked one another, and we broke off, and last time we got together we laughed and talked. He says, you married a guy by the name of David, and I married a colony by the name of David, and we're both happy.
The House of David produced a group of people the likes of which the world has never seen. If you could have wandered around on the grounds back in the day, everybody had this wonderful, gentle, genial expression on their face. Their eyes were always beaming. They were always fun to be with. They were always comfortable. They were not stuffy. They were actually fun.
So the Israelite House of David is the 7th church of the Christian Israelite Visitation that was started by Joanna Southcott in 1790s and 1800s in England. They were a movement based primarily out of the books of Genesis and Revelation.
The House of David was formed as sort of a Noah's Ark, which is supposed to bear the faithful through the troubled times before the end times, bear them safely through those times. That's why they built the colony. That's why it was built as large as it was and had as much land as it did, because it was supposed to eventually welcome home the lost tribes of Israel, talking over 100,000 people.
So in the book of Revelation, it's said that there will be 144,000 of the elect. So there's the 12 tribes of Israel, and you have 12,000 from each tribe that will comprise that number. And they will be gathered together at the end times. They will be saved, basically, from the destruction of the earth. And this is the group that will then repopulate the earth. And the Christian Israelites, particularly the 7th church, have a new kind of a spin on that.
The ingathering comes about bringing back all the scattered seed from the 4 corners of the earth. And amongst that whole crowd is the 144,000, which is actually 288,000 because it's to be male and female. So amongst the people that come in, they may not come in as couples, but if they are singles like myself, there is an appointed female for you.
So the core beliefs, the primary one is the life of the body. So these people believe that if they live according to the principles of their faith, that they will not taste death. Their flesh will be transformed into an immortal body, and essentially they will live forever and be part of the regenerated earth.
The concept is the second coming is imminent, and rather than people going up to heaven or going down to hell, the prevalent Christian metaphor, the notion in these religions, is that Eden is right here on earth.
Ron Taylor is probably the most knowledgeable living person when it comes to the Israelite faith. He is the grandson of one of the Australian converts.
He is a very religious man who looked into the faith and made his choice for Mary City of David. He is now the secretary to the trustees of Mary City of David, essentially the leader of the colony.
This is in the 1880s. Mary and Benjamin Purnell were living in Richmond, Indiana in the late 1880s.
Benjamin Purnell grew up in Kentucky. He was a preacher of great power.
Who was Mary Stollard? There's not a lot known about her early history. She was a visionary, she was a preacher, she was very much of a writer. She wasn't the showman that Benjamin was. I think that she did a great deal behind the scenes.
And they became followers of Michael Mills for a while in Detroit, who had a commune called God House. Mills eventually was jailed for statutory rape. And when Mills was sent to prison, Benjamin took his chance to jump in, and the Grafton lighted on him. He became the seventh messenger. So he took some of those followers from the Mills commune, and they preached at a lot of fairs. And the line between entertainment and preaching at a lot of these country fairs in the 1890s, 1900s is a little bit blurry.
Everything was spectacle, everything was a show. And Mary speaks very appreciatively of the time they spent among carnival folk.
But Benjamin had a folksy way about him, and if you read some of his dialogues, he uses the language of the people, and he's looking for the pure-hearted people from the common folk to come and follow him. And he was very charismatic.
Benjamin and Mary got their start in Fostoria, Ohio, many years before they came to Benton Harbor. Started preaching down there.
Fostoria, Ohio was a crucial penultimate location of the Purnells before the final ingathering that led to the establishment of the Israelite House of David in Benton Harbor in 1903. Because of a tragedy that occurred, their daughter Hetty was working in a fireworks factory, and there was a massive explosion that killed a number of people in the building, basically incinerating their bodies. And because the Purnells did not acknowledge death, they refused to identify her remains or to claim them for burial.
The House of David does not recognize death as such. It's not something to be celebrated or even observed. It's just a passage. They did not think that their members would die. They pretty much ignored it.
I've seen 55 people go out of here, and some of them were very special people. I've never been to a funeral.
One of the reasons Benjamin and Mary ran into trouble at Fostoria was that when their daughter was killed in a fireworks accident, they would not attend the funeral.
In the New Testament, Jesus is walking along and gathering disciples, people coming and going, and there's a young man that comes to him and says wants to follow him. And Jesus says to him, well, go get your grip, whatever, and come follow me. He says, Lord, first I must go bury my father. And Jesus said to him, let the dead bury the dead, follow thou me. In other words, if you want to be with the dead, go for it. If you want to follow me, follow me.
And this outraged the people in Fostoria, Ohio, and in some ways contributed to the Purnells having to move on from there.
There was a Christian contingent in Fostoria that was very bitter and hateful towards them. And they used that as ammunition to, you're not even going to show any respect for your daughter going to a funeral. So there was clamor and all kinds of stuff.
There is a quote from the sixth messenger, a man named James Jezreel. It says, "O happy Michigan, out of thee shall come a star."
Benton Harbor, Michigan was a thriving port city with its sister city, St. Joseph, and there was a wealthy family there, the Bauschke family, that were carriage and wagon makers, and they had been followers of the Jezreelite church of the Sixth Messenger, and they found out about Benjamin, and they actually reached out to Benjamin and invited the Purnells to come. And I'm sure Benjamin was delighted to have an earnest follower, and also delighted that the Boschkes were a family of considerable financial resources. So to have them as faithful followers really made it possible for him to found the colony.
The Israelite House of David looks forward to the ingathering, which is essentially going to be the 12 lost tribes of Israel. When end times arrive, these faithful will literally come over to Benton Harbor, and they will be housed at the colony, and there they will be safely borne through the troubled times that precede the actual end times.
So the House of David had a very extensive missionary effort, and they sent preachers out. These guys were going all over the country to spread the word about the ingathering and preach the message of the life of the body.
I was at my first school of the College of Art in Detroit in 1969, September. I was there for 2 years, and at that time I was working at the House of David restaurant in the summertime as a summertime job. I had brought the books with me to Detroit, but I never read them, although I had a picture of Benjamin and Mary on the wall. It's just one of the, I think it's one of the pictures that was in my grandparents' room that I had gotten and kept. In Detroit, I hung out with a group called the New Renaissance Brotherhood. It's Christian, it was Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, off the street people, and I was very much pleased to be part of that group. So I was interested in religion and religious thought. There was all kinds of things I was involved with. And I started reading the House of David literature in San Francisco just because I took the books out there with me, but I finally decided to start reading them. And so when I read Jesus Christ and I read about the life of the body and all this stuff, I said, wow, I mean, nobody else is talking about this. I mean, this is completely different. So I said, I'm going to find out. I mean, my people are involved with it. I'm going to find out. Bliss is black and white. It's either right or wrong. So I'm still following it.
I think the message resonated powerfully with primarily white, Protestant, working class people that believed they had a chance to live a much better life by following the message of the Purnells.
If you're worried about the end times, it's a very comforting religion. You are joining a sect that will see you through the troubles that precede the final times. All you do is hand over your worldly possessions to the House of David, and they will take care of every need you have from then on.
When you're working with a group of people like that, everybody's supporting each other because everybody's together putting food on the table, heating your buildings, paying your bills, and all that. Collectively, it works so much easier because it takes a lot of the stress away from you of all that you yourself trying to provide that for one family. It's like a whole big family providing all of it together.
In order to connect with the local community in Benton Harbor, who are obviously curious of who are all these long-haired, bearded people that are suddenly settling in our midst, the Israelites opened an amusement park.
I grew up in this area. We had two major amusement parks here. We had the Silver Beach Amusement Park, and we had the House of David Amusement Park. So for a kid growing up here, it was a phenomenal place to grow up. The parks were very different. Silver Beach more traditional. House of David more mysterious, with trains and race cars and just the more mysterious atmosphere. They had a beautiful stage. Very popular. People came from all over the world, literally, to visit the House of David Amusement Park.
I grew up in Benton Harbor in the 50s, born in 51. Benton Harbor was a bustling, very attractive, very commercial, and very friendly home kind of a place. There was just an ambience about the whole community.
They had tremendous bands. A lot of the Australian converts that came over were very skilled musicians, the Hannaford family particularly. And so they would have vaudeville type reviews. They had a traveling band. They wrote the House of David Blues, which was a really popular jazz song that was covered by numerous bands.
Benjamin particularly, and I think Mary in her quieter way later, were very good at taking and reading the 20th century and what appealed to people then and what was going on then. They were very modern people. Jazz bands and the traveling baseball teams. It was all about entertainment as well as religion.
And then, of course, they had the sports teams. So their baseball team, which started in the 19-teens, traveled all around the country.
Well, actually, it was three guys that were pitching the ball to one batter, and the batter would bat it back to him, and then the three guys catching the ball would do a razzle-dazzle with the ball behind their backs over, and act like they're throwing it, and the ball goes the other way, and they're doing this whole thing. In St. Louis in 1933, we went to play the Cardinals, and we played at night. Yeah, we were promoters of night baseball.
And actually, Negro League players played for them. They played against the Negro League teams many times.
They had this neat trick. I was told when they go out to they'd barnstorm all over the U.S. and they'd get out to these hick towns out in Montana, wherever, and they get in town and they meet the local promoter and he'd say, "Oh, great, who are you playing?" And they would name the Kansas City Monarchs or whoever. And you would, "Oh my God, we can't have that in town. No, we would have had somebody else for you." And also, they would always say, "No, we got a contract with them, so if you don't want to do this, we got to pull out." And they would back down. The game went on. Everybody had a great time. They paved the way. They paved racial integration in baseball, no question.
Vintage baseball has, you don't have any protective equipment. The catcher has no mask or any vest. Players wear no gloves. And you're there trying to catch this thing. And it's a bullet. And so consequently, when you put your hand out, you don't want to do this so that it hits. That's when you break a finger. You want to do this. But that's when you can really smash your palm too. So it's a real game. Anyway, 2 breaks here, that's good. 2 breaks here, this is broken. The thumbs are okay. This has got a twist and it's also growing a second nail because of that. I have a second nail growing out there. This is broken, that's broken, and that one's broken, and the sidearm here is broken. So I broke all those bones in 14 years of playing ball. And that's the way it is. It's, you sign up, you know what the risks are, so
The House of David had a number of distinct practices that really set them apart from the other folks that lived around them in Benton Harbor, and they were immediately identifiable on the street, of course, because of their long hair, their beards.
I've never cared much for a beard, but in my hair, when I was 30, I used to sit on it, so I've lost all my hair pretty much, just this little bit of nothing.
They did not drink alcohol, but they were not against people drinking alcohol. For instance, during Prohibition, they actually were against Prohibition. They operated a beer garden in conjunction with their amusement park.
I drank a bit in high school, everybody did, that sort of silly stuff in college, but that was no big deal.
They were vegetarians, and those were aspects of purification and trying to regain the state of Adam and Eve before the fall.
The physical body, the mortal body, they call it the vile body, or in Christian terms, it's sinful, it's flesh. And this ties back to the story of Adam and Eve.
They were celibate, of course.
And let's see, Barbara Slaughton. First date we had, she assured me we were not going to go to bed, and I said, "Amen." We got along wonderfully. I kissed her one time, and that was the day we parted when I was coming over here and going to Providence. Myself, I look forward to the time when I'll have a wife. That's to go into the millennium, to pre-produce, to produce a generation, you'll have to have a wife. I'm letting God choose that for me. I'm not going to try and choose that myself, okay?
His entire religion has a kind of erotic foundation, the male and female. I think that whoever else he was, Benjamin was very charismatic. There were a lot of young people here at the time. The young men and women were gorgeous. All of the old photographs show off their hair, show off their beauty, deliberately.
And Ron, in his artwork and in his journals and his own writing, has a very, very deep-seated interest in kind of the divine feminine.
8 hours a week I was drawing unclothed figures. I became enamored with the beauty of the physical body, and when I started reading scriptures and seeing, well, God created man after his own image, and I said, well, there's nothing dirty or ugly about God, I hope. So I kind of took that very, very simply, that it's a beautiful thing, and it's what I choose to see about it. Dance is just beautiful, and their figures are gorgeous. I mean, these people are beautiful people, beautiful figures. Brittany Brown was Miss Benton Harbor 2004, who went on to be the queen of the whole pageant and festival. She was a dance student, and I took her some dance drawings and I gave them to her to congratulate her on her success as Miss Blossom Time. And she was very elated with it, and so we got to know each other. She invited me to her open house after the Blossom Time Festival. I was the only white person there, which didn't make me feel uncomfortable. They're all wonderful people. I had a girl come in one time and look at some of my dancers, and one of them was unclothed. Some of these dancers like that, and something about I was revealing too much of the figure and showing the nipples and all that. And I said to her, I said, you know what? God designed the breast for a reason, and there's nipples on it, and if there wasn't a nipple, you and I wouldn't be standing here. We're mammals. It comes from a creation. Everything in the body has a purpose. You either see it for what it is, or you see it as you're looking at it now, something. You can't look at that. Excuse me. Don't go there. It just makes me angry. I just had no patience for that, because I've been dealing with the beauty of it for so long. It's like talking to a little kid that doesn't know any better.
This is where you do your art?
Yeah.
Can you show us
Matting.
quickly that?
Yeah, sure. I think the light bulb's working here. Louise Rayner came out of Vienna, Jewish lady. Also was in Berlin. She got out of Germany about 1932. Not Warner Brothers, but MGM brought her over. 1936, she won the Emmy, what do you call that? The big thing for film acting. Oscar. She won the Oscar in 36 and 37, back to back, and then she left Hollywood for good. She said, I've done it all, I've achieved everything, and she didn't like the hokey pokey people that were in Hollywood, so she went back to theater in London.
And I'll show myself and my son to all of them.
I discovered her and I said, her 100th birthday. Her 100th birthday is during the week of our opening. We're going to do a birthday party. They made 2 cakes, one a little cake with 1 candle and one a huge cake with 100 candles. Thank you for the beautiful collection you made for me. This was the birthday thing, and this was the drawings later with the dancers. What a sweetheart. Thank goodness she got out of Germany in Austria, because that would have been the end. People like that would have disappeared. Jewish.
The House of David has always been accepted by the business community. They always paid their bills on time. They were very instrumental in the economy of the Twin Cities and Berrien County, both in agriculture and tourism and even manufacturing. So in one sense, they were always accepted by the area.
The Israelites were not averse to enjoying the material comforts that God had provided them in this world and this life. Mary wore jewelry, and she had beautiful dresses. In the portrait behind us, which has been enhanced by Ron Taylor, you can see her beautiful gold watch, which has engraved decoration. So they were not ascetic in the sense that they eschewed wealth and luxury. As a matter of fact, they kind of embraced and embodied it.
We're going to go into the 1920s. 20s are what I call the roller coaster ride of the House of David. Basically, you have the same thing as you see today in the world. Big money, big success brings big troubles.
So there apparently was a prophecy in the House of David that went like this: Benjamin is to be accused of everything the world is guilty of. Can you talk about some of the things that he was accused of?
Foremost is the misconduct among young girls in the colony, I think, is a big one.
It's known that Benjamin enjoyed the company of teenage girls because there's a bazillion photographs of him with what's called the Shiloh girls, and they're all very photogenic together.
When people joined the House of David, they turned over all their worldly goods and wealth to the House of David, which in turn would agree to take care of them as long as they lived. Most people were happy with their decision and stayed. A few were not, and when they decided to quit the colony, which of course they were free to do at any time, they wanted their money back. There were no money back guarantees when they went in. So the colony refused, and that resulted in quite a bit of litigation. That in turn resulted in a lot of very hard feelings. There were a lot of accusations levied toward Benjamin, theft, and there was a lot of talk about sexual improprieties, and this and that. That's the basis of how all these troubles started. They were never proven in court. In fact, Benjamin was never really found guilty in a criminal trial. That was a civil trial.
No, I have no faith in what they said whatsoever. We that believe in his innocence readily see this as they're prepared witnesses by attorneys that also are going to reap benefits monetarily for victory in this case, as are the plaintiffs. So the whole idea is that the goal is money.
I don't think that Benjamin did several hundred young women. I don't think that's possible. He was in his 60s. He was diabetic. He was an older man. Older men kind of don't function that way, especially ill older men.
In September of 2017, we were contacted by the niece of an elderly lady in New York City who said she had a box of paperwork that belonged to her grandfather, but it included testimony and statements from young ladies who had alleged that they had been abused by Benjamin.
Personally, the way I feel about that, and I should say this because I think it makes a lot of sense, but in the realm of this, there were more defendants for Benjamin Purnell than there were plaintiffs, because most of the colony people went to court and testified for him.
Among the papers, there was a explanation, scriptural explanations that the young ladies gave, that he would give as the reason for why these things had to happen. He would explain that he needed to have these relations because of, and he would give a scriptural explanation. I don't know, do you want me to read some of them?
Sure.
St. Mark 14:3 is quoted, "And being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious, and she brake the box and poured it on his head." And underneath here it says, Purnell interpreted this to the girls to show that the breaking of the alabaster box is figurative of rupturing the hymen or deflowering a virgin, and the ointment is figurative of intercourse. Let's see.
If I was a member of the House of David during that period of time, and I thought that my daughter had been raped by Brother Benjamin, I don't care what happened to him. I was going to go after all the rest of them if they were part of it. If I felt that was the truth, I don't care what happens to him. If he actually did something like that, my daughter told me that, I'm going to go back after all of them. I'm not after money. I just want justice. Never happened.
I guess my question would be, like, you know, Benjamin denied all this. Who do you believe? You don't have to answer.
I want to answer, but I don't know if I should. It's having read through all of the accounts that I read and transcribed, there were quite a few girls who had kind of the same story. In our day and age, you don't discount those things. And I like Ron, you know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
and coming from where I come from, I mean, he told you I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, so from a fundamentalist background, you just, what you believe is what you know, you just know. You know what I mean? So there's no way you could ever change his mind, or he could ever see it in the bad light.
Anyway, let's move forward. Benjamin died December 16th of 1927, and the people in the colony, this was very upsetting.
The death of Benjamin Purnell, especially following the trauma of all the trials of the 19 teens and 20s, must have had an adverse and detrimental effect on the Israelites.
It was a shaking because you're taking away one of the pillars.
Most of them remained faithful, but the real problem arose when Judge H.T. Dewhurst joined from California with his wife and 2 sons. 2 distinct factions kind of crystallized from the body of the membership of the House of David. One was loyal to Judge Dewhurst, and the other was loyal to Mary Purnell. Already there had been an effort to kind of undermine Mary's authority, both personally and theologically. Her name had been effaced from some of the publications, even some of her own writings that were printed at the House of David were actually destroyed rather than being issued to the world. And so her loyal followers actually seceded from the Israelite House of David and purchased land literally just down the street from the site, where they lived for a while in big open tents as they built a new colony, known generally as Mary City of David.
Mary had a much purer vision of the religion than Judge Dewhurst, who liked the commercial aspects a little bit more. The split actually divided families, separated good friends. When they did split, some literally never saw each other again, even though they were living right next door to each other.
Those that followed Mr. Dewhurst against Mary made the wrong choice altogether. He was probably the biggest opportunist that ever came to the colony. He was a political figure. He knew how to manipulate people. He knew how to handle money, and he knew how to politically be correct. Mary had none of those skills.
Mary City of David really reflects the time when it was built. The buildings at the House of David that remain are unbelievably opulent. Amongst the Australians that came over, there were some really talented architects. When the schism happened and Mary City of David was built during the worst part of the Depression, and so it's built of materials that are way less elegant and opulent than at House of David, and it feels much more like a utilitarian environment. And that's become low-income housing locally. And so it's been a kind of monumental task for him, especially as he's gotten older, to keep up all the roofs and all the plumbing and safe drinking water and all these things. And it feels a little bit Eastern European in a way, a little bit kind of gray and depressed, and people that have had a hard time in life are living there. So it, in some way, it kind of detracts from, I think, probably the joy that went into the construction of it originally by these people who once again thought they were building this new Jerusalem.
The House of David had a colony in Australia besides the Fifth Church, which was already there too. The members of the House of David colony invested in some land around some very valuable harbor land. Though when the last member died a few years ago, all that money came due to the House of David. It's millions, we're talking millions of dollars. They have used that money to extensively refurbish their grounds and their structures.
Do you wish it was shared between the two?
Well, no, because we're the ones that go through the hardships. We have to go through the experience of hardships. We're not out here, pedaling easy. That you don't get to the goal by that. That you get through suffering and learning to do it the hard. I'm out there working because that's what I want to be doing. I don't want to be sitting in an office twiddling my thumbs, answering a phone and fooling around, with archives. I want to be working. That's my job. That's what I want to be doing. I don't mind the struggle. It's all part of it. That's where you learn the miracles.
People from the city of David did not speak to people here at the House of David for years and years and years. Ron has changed all that, and I think in the past few years, I go across the street all the time. Ron gets along with us very, very well. So there are about 1,000 people here in the heyday of the colony, which means that when people came here, they were young, and they thought that the ingathering and the transformation would happen in 1906. It didn't, and it didn't happen in 1917. They found themselves getting old. They found the place aging, and immortality had not happened. I think that they were faced with aging.
If you read the prophecies of Benjamin and Mary, Mary, for example, said that before the end times do arrive, every remaining member of the House of David will be able to fit into her closet. I've seen her closet, it's pretty small, so.
They had expected to become immortal when they were still young and beautiful, and instead they were growing old and dying. And all their friends were dying. This place became a few old people, just a handful of old people in the 70s and 80s.
As a lot of those believers began to die off, because in the end they were not immortal, the movement itself had really waned globally.
I was personally devastated when the House of David amusement park closed. I had such great memories of that place. I liked the people, everybody I met. It's been a source of sadness and regret to see the numbers shrinking like they have.
I mean, the story of Ben Harbor and St. Joe for me is the story of this country. I mean, Ben Harbor was actually, of the two, was this incredibly prosperous community. It was booming. It had all these foundries, parts manufacturers for the auto companies. It sits on the edge of all these really lush fruit fields.
Benton Harbor and St. Joseph occupy a very strategically unique and valuable place on Lake Michigan. It's a port, it's a good port.
I grew up in Benton Harbor and, became kind of aware of my community around me, by the mid-50s, late 50s. Businesses were thriving. The high school was famous for its band and its orchestra and its athletic teams.
And back in the 1930s and 40s, they actively, they being the manufacturers, actively recruited blacks, mainly from Arkansas, to come work in the factories. And so they actually sent down trucks to bring them back to Benton Harbor.
With the decline of manufacturing, Benton Harbor was hit particularly hard. There were many factories there. They closed. That cut off all the low-skill job market. Things went downhill rapidly from there. Every urban ill that you can think of came to visit Benton Harbor starting in the 1970s and 80s. It was known nationally as an economic basket case. In fact, the Chicago Tribune headline referred to it as the worst city in the U.S. I might dispute that a little bit, but it was very bad.
And I go through those places today on a daily basis, going through it down to the post office on the river. And it's just so depressing. I can't tell you, because I just go back to the time when 2-3 little kids could walk from their grandparents' house on Pipestone half a mile up to the drugstore. No big deal. Not today. No, not today.
what happened there is what happened everywhere in this country is whites began to flee. I mean, and in this case, they simply fled for the other side of the river. And, with them went all the institutions. And there was a church, in fact, in Benton Harbor where half the congregation wanted to leave and half wanted to stay. And in the end, they couldn't reach consensus. And so half that congregation left for St. Joe. And so there's this notion that even God fled Benton Harbor. The people in St. Joe derisively refer to Benton Harbor as Benton Harlem, and the people in Benton Harbor refer to St. Joseph as St. Johannesburg.
I do know when I was a kid going out there in the 50s to the amusement park, I don't remember seeing any black people there at all. I can't believe they would have been kicked out. I honestly don't know.
Historically, what was the relationship like between the House of David and Mary City of David and the African American community?
That's a tough question. It is my understanding, historically, that the House of David and Mary City of David did not admit African Americans based on their scriptural interpretation of the curse of Ham, which I can't explain to you, but they didn't accept black people. So when black people would write to inquire about joining, they were usually politely put off or referred to a separate black House of David that existed in northern Indiana.
When I grew up here, there were 12 black people that lived within the community here. They were the remnant of a community in Otisca, Indiana, which is over the Ohio River from Louisville, just to the north and east. They held our faith, they believed our faith. Some of them went out on the road preaching, actually, in the South. And those 12 people petitioned if they could come up and be part of our community. Mary gave them the nod to do so.
I'm not sure I'm understanding why they weren't on the rolls. Why were they not members?
They were not made members. I've often wondered why myself. This is a lineage, this is a family, and it's to be kept clean. And so we don't believe in intermarriage of race. I'll tell you that right off. Having said that, I once dated a black girl. Okay, so I have. It's not a hatred thing. It's just basically you're following the rules of Scripture. Okay, and in fact, in my portrait studies, the books I've done of portraiture, I've done a number of black ladies. I have no problem with black people. I don't.
Are you aware of when the last time someone joined was? Is Ron the last person to join?
No, there's been a couple people that have been members there at Mary City of David that didn't last. There was a guy named Carl who was there for a while, and I think Ron had really high hopes that he would stick it out.
In the late 80s, early 90s, he came along and started reading the literature and took interest and wanted to join. And he was here 15 years. During that period of time, he did a lot of work. He went back into music because that's what he did for a living. And he found a lady friend. And so, lo and behold, a year or so later, after that, he decided that he was going to leave the colony. He wanted to get married and he wanted to go on with his music career. And so I said, if that's what you want to do, go for it. There were no hard feelings. I desperately needed him to stay because he was doing so much work, but I said, hey, you got to do what you got to do,
But he did not end up staying. So, but other than that, I don't think there's been anyone else that's come in as a short-termer or even as kind of an investigator. I just don't think that's happened.
Yeah, there were 56 here when I came, and gradually I've watched all of them. I've been part of 55 people going out. All the steps down, it's like it's been, of course, more and more things allocated to me, but there's nobody else here that has got the capacity or the youth to take it. And so I had to become, I was a trustee already, but I was more in paper than anything else. So I had to take on a lot of stuff that I didn't know much about. Yeah. always tight.
Do you have someone in mind? I mean, you mentioned you're having a little bit of health issues. Like, is there someone you're counting on?
That's really the perennial question with most people, especially when I did the tours. What's going to happen? And basically, it's a theological answer. You know, you come here in faith, you believe, and you work day to day towards the faith. And so there's many prophecies regarding that. And so coming down to a small number is just a sign to me. And that's just basically, I've heard it all my life. I mean, my grandparents and my dad would talk about it. Because, numbers were decreasing even in their day. We're down to the bones. If there's going to be a gathering spot and this is it, somebody's got to be here. Something's got to maintain this place to be. And it's supposed to look like, well, there's a place in the writings that says, Sister Mary says, that day will come when people will pass by and say that's where the house of David used to be.
Does it ever feel a little empty or lonely, like with a big house like this that's...
No, I've never felt alone. I'm kind of a person that has always enjoyed my own company. And I'm always busy in my mind if I'm not with my hands, doing things, thinking about things. It's like the old thing, many times I've come to a project, there's just me. It's something I don't know if I can lift or I can do this. And all I can say is to myself is I don't know how I'm going to do it. All I know is that I'm going to do it. And somehow it gets done.
Were Benjamin and Mary expecting to physically live on?
That was the program. However, basically what happens, and it's actually told in the book of Revelation, and they would be buried 3 days in the earth and they would rise again. Speaking of them, so we expect to see them again. The 3 days, of course, is one of those things that's a mystery, but that's not unheard of that there's mysteries, and especially with time, what that 3.5 days means, whether it's 10 years per day, whether it's 20 years per day, we don't know, and we're not supposed to know.
When you believe something very, very strongly, and that belief is shown to be false, the tendency is to double down on the belief, not to abandon the belief. It explains a lot about politics, it explains a lot about religion.
I had a presentiment once, and this goes back about 6 or 7 years, and I was driving. Actually, it was dangerous, but I had this presentiment when I was driving, and it just lasted maybe 2-3 seconds, and I felt this whole euphoric feeling of something leaving my body, going up and being encompassing me, and just feeling this amazing love and peace and power. I was driving a car, and I thought, wow. And all I could remember was just the feeling, the joy, and I had this image in my mind of being shown what was going on. I mean, it was like I was looking at me, what was happening. Just touched with something that just took me out of time and space and me, it just. And I just have that feeling this is where I should be and where I want to be. And I want to keep the want to be and the should be at the same place. And that's the willingness part of it. And it's not just work, hands-on, it's basically faith. You're doing it for a reason. And that's like art. I don't do art unless there's a reason. I'm still striving, but I know there's a lot ahead that I don't have a clue about. I mean, there's been so many doors opened that before I got to that, I didn't know about it. So I know there's a lot left.